The 6th of May 1993. A heavy silence hung over the house on Bayview Drive in St. Catharines, Ontario. For 71 days, forensic teams had literally dismantled the place brick by brick, looking for anything to link its inhabitants to the most gruesome crime spree in North American history. The warrant expired. The police left empty-handed, leaving behind a hollow shell and a mountain of unanswered questions. But Ken Murray, the lead defense attorney for the primary suspect, had an ace up his sleeve. Following a coded tip from his client behind bars, Murray climbed the wooden stairs toward the master bathroom. He stood beneath a ceiling light fixture, carefully pried off the frosted glass cover, and reached into the dark, dusty void of wires. His fingers hit cold plastic. He pulled them out. 6 8mm videotapes. At that moment, Murray didn't realize he was holding the smoking gun that would tear through a web of lies and expose the most catastrophic legal blunder in judicial history. These weren't just tapes. They were a cold glass eye that had witnessed the morphology of absolute evil, capturing muffled screams that the scales of justice had never been allowed to hear. A predator isn't born overnight. He's manufactured. On the 27th of August 1964, Paul Bernardo entered the world, carrying a hidden inheritance of family trauma. Behind a polished middle-class facade, the walls hid a toxic dynamic. At 16, Paul took a psychological hit that split his identity. He discovered the man raising him wasn't his biological father. He was a bastard in his mother's eyes, and as the verbal abuse at home escalated, his respect for authority and the maternal bond withered into nothing. While studying accounting at the University of Toronto, Paul built a suit-and-tie persona. He was handsome, charismatic, and worked at the prestigious firm Price Waterhouse. But in the basement of his mind, he was feeding fantasies of absolute dominance. By the late 80s, the fantasy hit the pavement. He began stalking young women at dark bus stops in the Crade, Scarborough suburbs, using a knife to force compliance. The media dubbed him the Scarborough. He moved like a ghost, studying police patrol patterns and exploiting gaps in communication between agencies. In November 1990, during a routine sweep, Paul gave blood and saliva samples to the cops. In any functional system, that sample should have ended the nightmare right there. But, in one of the most fatal forensic lapses in history, that sample fell into a bureaucratic black hole. It sat in a lab drawer for over 2 years, unfollowed, giving the predator a golden ticket to evolve from random assault to calculated murder. In October 1987, at a pet supply convention in a Toronto hotel, Paul's path crossed with a 17-year-old veterinary assistant named Karla Homolka. She was attractive, blonde, and looking for someone to follow. Paul knew instantly he had found the perfect clay to mold into a partner for his depravity. The psychological reprogramming was slow but total. He dictated how she wore her hair, what she wore, and what she thought. Karla wasn't the helpless victim she later claimed to be. She was a sharp observer who realized that staying in Paul's spotlight meant checking her moral compass at the door. Infatuation turned into a strategic criminal partnership. Karla's role at the clinic granted her unprecedented access to restricted medical supplies. It was there that she began gathering the tools necessary to bring Paul's dark visions to life. These resources became the primary means through which they established absolute control over every situation, transforming their disturbing plans from mere thoughts into a tragic reality that would change lives forever. By the end of 1990, Paul wanted an ultimate Christmas gift. He wanted a specific type of victim, and Karla didn't hesitate. She offered up her own younger sister, 15-year-old Tammy, as a sacrifice on the altar of her twisted relationship. Deep-seated jealousy and a need to hoard Paul's attention made her own sister a legitimate target in Karla's eyes. It wasn't a whim. In July, they ran a test, drugging Tammy's pastor with, but the dose wasn't high enough. They adjusted the protocol. On the night of the 23rd of December, 1990, after a family gathering, Karla handed her sister a drink spiked with halcyon. Once the girl passed out, she was moved to the basement. There, Karla played the role of anesthesiologist, pressing a halcyon-soaked rag to her sister's face. She ignored the basic medical safety of mixing the gas with oxygen. The reckless use caused visible chemical burns on Tammy's skin. While Paul committed the assault, the camera rolled. Suddenly, Tammy began to choke. The chemical cocktail triggered a fatal reaction. She aspirated while unconscious. The couple's panicked attempts at CPR failed. They scrubbed the crime scene, dressed her, and called 911. At the hospital, the coroner made a second catastrophic error. The death was ruled an accidental alcohol-induced choking. The chemical burns were ignored. Tammy was buried, and with her, the couple's first secret. They were now professional killers. Crossing the threshold of murder only sharpened their appetite. On the 14th of June 1991, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey was locked out of her Burlington home after missing her curfew. In that vulnerable moment, Paul appeared. With a practiced manipulator's charm, he lured her to his car, blindfolded her, and took her to his slaughterhouse in St. Catharines. Leslie wasn't just a victim, she was a project. For 24 hours, she was held captive and subjected to unimaginable violations, all while pop music played in the background and cameras recorded every second. Karla didn't just watch, she directed. She tightened the bonds. When Leslie's blindfold slipped and she realized she could identify them, her death warrant was signed. She was with an electrical cord. To dispose of the evidence, Paul used his workshop. He cut the teenager into 10 pieces, encased them in concrete blocks, and dropped them into the depths of Lake Gibson. On the 29th of June 1991, Karla wore a white wedding dress and walked down the aisle with Paul in a lavish ceremony. That same day, by pure chance, a small boat was floating on Lake Gibson. The passengers noticed strange concrete blocks bobbing on the surface. They were pulled up, revealing Leslie's remains. The vow of "till death do us part" coincided exactly with the discovery of their most heinous crime. Disposing of Leslie gave them a false sense of invincibility. On the 16th of April 1992, they went hunting again. In a church parking lot, they spotted 15-year-old Kristen French. Karla played the bait. She got out of the car holding a map, pretending to be lost, and asked the girl for help. The moment Kristen stepped closer, Paul lunged from behind with a... Kristen was held for 3 days. To break her spirit, they forced her to watch the tapes of Leslie Mahaffey's torture. The message was clear: there is no hope. On April 19, Easter Sunday, they ended it. The same electric was used to take her life. They meticulously scrubbed her body to remove DNA, cut her hair, and dumped her naked remains in a ditch near Burlington. The discovery of Kristen's body 11 days later sparked a national panic. Schools became fortresses. The press dubbed the predator the schoolgirl killer, while police chased thousands of dead-end leads, unable to connect the Scarborough Rat to the St. Catharines murders. By late 1992, the partnership began to rot from the inside. The violence Paul inflicted on his victims turned inward toward Karla. Daily beatings and threats to expose her role in her sister's death turned the house into a ticking time bomb. In January 1993, the violence peaked when Paul assaulted her with a heavy metal flashlight. Karla fled while Paul was away. She tried to find the tapes to destroy them, but couldn't find the secret stash. She went to a clinic where doctors documented the horrific bruising on her face and body. She moved in with relatives and began plotting her survival strategy. Meanwhile, at the Forensic Science Center, a delayed miracle happened. The DNA sample from 1990 was finally tested. It was a perfect match for the Scarborough Rapst. On the 17th of February 1993, SWAT teams stormed Paul Bernardo's house. Karla knew the walls were closing in, so she struck first. She sat before investigators and wove a masterpiece of a story. She claimed she was a psychological and physical hostage, a victim forced into the crimes at gunpoint. The investigators, desperate for a lead on the murders, took the bait. Her lawyer negotiated a deal with the Crown. They wanted the deal with the devil. Karla pleaded guilty to 2 reduced charges of manslaughter for Leslie and Kristen, receiving only a 12-year sentence in exchange for testifying against Paul. The charges regarding her sister Tammy or the sexual assaults were effectively wiped off the table. While the courts finalized Karla's deal, the 6 tapes were still in that bathroom ceiling. As we open this story, attorney Ken Murray retrieved them in May 1993 and kept them secret, believing they would sink his client. But in September 1994, after leaving the case, the tapes were handed over to the police. When prosecutors hit play, the blood drained from their faces. The screen didn't show a terrified girl crying in a corner. It showed an active, enthusiastic participant. Karla was seen prepping the drugs, tightening the ligatures, and calmly adjusting the camera. She had lied about everything, including the way she gassed her own sister. But the legal disaster was already set in stone. The deal was signed, the sentence was passed, and the Canadian justice system couldn't take back the immunity, even if it was built on a lie. They were forced to proceed with Paul's trial, using Karla as their star witness, even though her credibility was incinerated before their eyes. In May 1995, Paul Bernardo's trial began. The courtroom was a powder keg. Judge Patrick Lesage made an extraordinary ruling. To protect the dignity of the victims, the videotapes would never be shown to the public or the press. Only the jury and lawyers would see the screens. The rest of the room would only hear the audio. It was a surreal, nightmare scene. The sound of Leslie's screams and Kristen's pleas echoed through the speakers, punctuated by the couple's laughter and Paul's sick threats. Karla stood on the witness stand for days, speaking in a robotic, ice-cold tone. She tried to stick to her victim narrative, ignoring the glaring contradictions caught on tape. Defense attorney John Rosen savaged her credibility, pointing out she had bought her freedom with the blood of those girls. On the 1st of September 1995, the jury took only 8 hours. Paul Bernardo was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and branded a dangerous offender, essentially ensuring he would never see the sun as a free man again. He was sent to the maximum security Kingston Penitentiary to be buried alive. On the 4th of July, 2005, the prison gates opened for Karla Homolka. She was 35 years old. She had served her 12 years, a number that felt like a slap in the face to the souls of Tammy, Leslie, and Kristen. But she didn't leave her past behind. She became a global pariah. She changed her name multiple times, moved to the Caribbean for a while, married her lawyer's brother, and had 3 children. But the cameras and the public's rage followed her like a stain. Every school she tried to enroll her kids in faced protests. Every neighborhood she moved into raised banners of rejection. The Canadian legal and police system learned a bitter lesson. The Campbell report on the failures of the case led to radical changes in how police handle missing persons and DNA databases across provinces. The story of the Scarborough Rapid and his partner wasn't just a series of crimes, it was a deep dive into the collapse of polished social facades. It's a permanent reminder that evil doesn't always wear a monster's mask. Sometimes, it sits next to you on a bus, smiles from behind a vet's desk, or shares a Christmas dinner just waiting for the lights to go out. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like it to support me. See you in the next story. Goodbye.